The AA video game space has grown a lot in recent years. With games like Control, Hellblade, and even Metro, it's clear the industry is making bigger steps to constantly push the envelope on how much can be achieved on smaller budgets. Steelrising is the latest entry and a pleasant twist to the otherwise increasingly overly saturated Souls-like genre. I had the chance to play and finish Steelrising over the past week, and despite a few issues here and there, I was genuinely left with an overall positive impression and a better experience even compared to some of the other fully fledged recent AAA releases. That's why today we're gonna take a look at what the game does right, where it misses the mark, and at the end of it, I'm going to try to give it a score from 1 to 10. And by the way, if you want to buy the game a little bit cheaper, there's a discount link that I'm going to post down below. Now, before we get an idea of what this game is and isn't, you might also want to know where it comes from. Steelrising was developed by Spiders, a video game company that's been around for a while actually and has been specializing in action RPGs. If you look at some of their previous releases like Greedfall and the Technomancer before it, it's clear they took a lot of what they learned during those games and poured all of that knowledge and experience into the newest one. Steelrising seems to be and is actually a great step up both aesthetically and gameplay mechanics wise over the studio's predecessors, and likely not where their expertise will end. Despite some similarities with Bloodborne, what you're seeing here isn't just another Souls copycat, but rather a game that inspires itself from the otherwise excellent gameplay from Software and then adds its own twist to it. The story is set during the French Revolution, and outside of the setting being in Paris and actually historical figures making an appearance, that's pretty much where the real history ends and where the alternate fantasy version begins. The French Revolution has been brutally suppressed by King Louis XVI and his army of mechanical monsters. You get to play as Aegis, a female automat and bodyguard of Queen Marie Antoinette, and probably the only such mechanical marvel that fights for the objective good in this scenario. As such, you're tasked with finding the creator of these machines and putting an end to the Mad King's tyrannical rule. Along the lines, you get to meet various historical figures, even learn more about them and their importance to the overall French Revolution, do side missions for them, and so on. If you were a big fan of older Assassin's Creed games, especially Unity, which was one of my favorite in the series, it touches the same event and you'll come to appreciate the setting here too. Especially since there are not that many games out there nowadays taking more inspiration from such momentous historical events and how much we can learn from them. But it took me roughly 15 hours to reach the credits, mind you, with doing a lot of the side missions as well, so realistically it takes roughly just 10 hours to complete that story if you focus on it. Which, by the way, yeah, there's gonna be a lot of side stuff too that's going to provide a lot more context to the overarching story, if not even exclusive rewards that you cannot get otherwise. But unlike the recent From Software release Elden Ring, Steelrising does resort to cinematics and in-game cutscenes to tell the story rather than just use the environment, which for the most part I found to be well narrated and well acted. A few exceptions here and there were present given its budget, like a few very skippable interactions and a few lines later in the story that seemed a little bit too over the top compared to what was presented until then. But probably the biggest hit back to reality, for me at the very least, that this isn't a AAA game at the end of the day, has to be the facial animations and the lip syncing, which I almost never found to meet an acceptable quality standard, and sometimes it was quite off-putting. But this isn't a $60 game at the end of the day, so I'm willing to let it pass, as the story felt captivating enough from start to finish. Gameplay-wise, it never feels as smooth as a Souls game either, even though it kinda tries to replicate some of that. Of course, this is given its budget, but I honestly didn't have a problem with it being a little bit more clunky, as it did not get too long for me to get adjusted to the more clunky, telegraphed feel of Steelrising, which makes sense given the fact that you take control over an automat, a steampunk version of robots, and fight other similar mechanical constructs with similar telegraphed and janky movements. Having a large selection of weapons to choose from, some even from the start of the game, lets you enjoy the gameplay the way you feel most comfortable. If you like fast-paced, stabby and dodgy tactics, there are several weapons for that, just like how there are many slower, more brutal versions, like for example a powerful mace that also acts like a cannon of sorts, or a pistol or a bayonet to shoot enemies from afar. All of these are a major option within the game's world. There was a great variety of weapons and tools that you both discover during gameplay or get at various points from the main plot. What I really enjoyed was the extra action that every single weapon had. Most of these revolved around offensive capabilities, with very few and far in between options for an actual shield or block mechanic, which denote Steelrising's focus on being very aggressive with the enemy instead of trying to hold back, which can be quite punishing if you're not playing it right. Playing as Aegis also gives you access to other ways to upgrade your combat powers and the looks. There are several attributes that you can upgrade with the anima resource you get from enemies. Also, different clothing pieces and armor sets can be found at various points, all providing different bonuses and advantages, all the way to the controlling of the consumables that you can use either on yourself or against enemies like explosives and everything else in between. It wasn't anywhere near as intricate though as it might seem at a first glance, and for the most part I was able to easily finish the entire game by just focusing on 3 of the 6 stats. So still, this felt like a solid action RPG from start to finish, but it's not going to be as deep as you might think for a AAA, since this is obviously not that. Most of these items, of course, also came from exploration. As you progress in the main story, you'll get various tools to better traverse the environment, including ones that at first are completely blocked off for you, but you can always get back to the starting areas and open them once you get these brand new tools, which makes these levels a lot more interesting. There's an incentive there to go onto these side paths, as there's always a chest waiting for you, or maybe a way for you to provide a new weapon or item, or at least some kind of consumable to aid you in your journey ahead. But I never felt like there was much meaning to having a side objective outside of it just providing a momentary distraction on my way towards the main mission. Sometimes I was presented with a new cutscene by being in an adjacent area, but there wasn't anything else in there to interact with, so I would quickly leave off to the main path once realizing that. What isn't holding back the game as much is probably going to be its beauty and definitely the art style. It doesn't matter if you're in some village in the countryside, a back alley in Paris, or the lush palace gardens later down the line, the game manages to captivate the moment you arrive in these areas. Now, some of this wow factor can quickly fade away from the middle of the game and onwards, and you might notice some slight inconsistencies in terms of quality and sharpness for many of the textures you might see, especially in this area right here. It was particularly bad around the canals because I'm not even sure why this was happening, but all of the assets seemed very blurry, and especially the water looked particularly bad, even though up until this point it was pretty much all amazing. But with that in mind, I think Steelrising offers a solid experience, and it's clear the developers have poured their heart and soul into it. Just like Aegis herself, the game looks like a construct, an imitation of the real thing, but there's actually more to it than meets the eye. Be it its unique setting, the intriguing plot, the varied and fun gameplay, or the visuals, or even if you're just aching for the next Souls-like experience, I think the game is definitely worth it. Having said that, the maximum I can rate this game is a solid 8 out of 10. I think this kind of creative ambition from smaller studios should be encouraged more, and I'm looking forward to what's coming next from this developer. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time.